Thanks for joining us for yet another Marketing Sherpa webinar. This one's coming at you compliments of Slingshot SEO today. We have an hour today actually to talk about SEO, specifically SEO tactics. And not just SEO tactics, but the use of data to influence your processes and decision-making capabilities in search marketing realm. All of which are geared towards, you guessed it, getting those optimum results. So let's go ahead and meet the gang. Okay, there we are. Let me go ahead and introduce you to Casey Bauer. She's a senior research analyst here at Marketing Sherpa, and both her and her partner in crime today, senior research manager Jen Doyle, are responsible for much of the golden data you find in our benchmark reports and those other publications as well. If you've had the opportunity to attend any of our summit events, you would have been able to see these ladies in action. Let me go ahead and just say thanks for you both to hopping on the call today.
Our pleasure.
I would also like to thank our guest speaker, Jesse Lafine, for taking time out of his schedule and to share some of the knowledge that he has on the subject of SEO. Jesse, appreciate it, buddy.
Happy to be here.
All right. Now, moving forward, we would like to encourage you to join the conversation today using that Sherpa hashtag that you Sherpa webinar hashtag, that you see there. You do also have the Ready Talk chat feature located to your left. Don't be shy, guys. We'd love to hear from you. Right. So, who is Marketing Sherpa? Well, we are a research and publishing organization. As such, we generate those how-tos, case studies, benchmark reports, and research that helps you do your job better. But this isn't just some two-dimensional process. In fact, it's a cycle. This is what enables us to continually modernize our resources, which in turn always brings you the marketing results that you're looking for. What do I mean? Well, we use this annual research-based publishing and training cycle. As the graphic shows here, the efforts begin when individuals like Jen, Casey, as well as surveyed marketers not unlike yourselves, are brought data to express in our benchmark reports and those special reports. This in turn brings you the established best practices via our newsletters and articles. As one would imagine, that then fuels our fires for our methodologies, which is at the heart of determining those proven tactics that are found in our how-to handbooks. Those methodologies are then expounded upon to give life to our teachings and actionable training opportunities, where we garner input that starts it all over again, ever updating that cycle. So that should go ahead and bring you up to speed on Marketing Sherpa. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jesse, and he's going to give you a little bit more on Slingshot SEO. Jesse?
Slingshot SEO is a company in Indianapolis, Indiana. We focus solely 100% on organic search rankings on major search engines like Google and Bing and Yahoo. You can see some of our clients there. We were also named as part of the Inc. 500 this year. We focus on digital relevance for deserving brands through organic search.
Awesome.
I think Casey's going to tell us what we're getting into today.
Casey, it's all you.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, as John already said, it's great having all of you here today, especially during this busy month and this busy time when we're all wrapping up 2011. Now, our goal for today's webinar is to help you select the right mix of SEO tactics for optimum results. And to accomplish this goal, what we've done is we've put together a good balance of research insights and practical methodologies. And so that's what our agenda is going to cover today. In terms of the research, we're going to kick off the webinar by discussing some of our research findings from our latest search marketing benchmark report. And then we're going to show you how using this kind of research data and following a process, following a strategy, can help you not only choose your SEO tactics, but better execute these. We'll then extend that idea of a process by wrapping up with an overview of a methodology that Slingshot SEO uses for their clients. Okay, so let's get into some of the research background. Just a moment. Okay, there we go. So earlier this year, we surveyed over 1,500 marketers on their search marketing programs. And in this survey, we tried to come at the subject of SEO from many different angles because we were trying to put together this comprehensive look at what's working and what's not working for marketers with their SEO programs today. So some of the survey questions covered their challenges and their goals for their search programs. We asked them how they were allocating their marketing dollars, where they were shifting the focus of their efforts, and in particular, if those efforts were moving in the direction of inbound marketing. We also asked them about the tactics they were using and asked them to rank the effectiveness and the difficulty of these, including what they were doing with content and also social media. So we covered a lot, and we can't really get into all of our findings in this one-hour webinar. So I just want to mention a few of the key research outcomes that fit with our topic today. And one of the first findings has to do with search marketing objectives and challenges, and that's what this chart shows. You can see the challenges from last year juxtaposed against the goals for next year. And for the most part, the most aggravating and frustrating challenges made the list of things to do for the upcoming year. So there's sort of this one-to-one balance. The primary example of that would be the first two, which is traffic and leads. And that's not really a surprise because, I mean, there's really never a year where we don't want more traffic and leads, let alone more qualified traffic and leads. Now, if you look through this chart, you can see that there are some exceptions to this parity between challenges and objectives. And one of the best examples of this is with strategy. Now, developing an effective and methodical strategy, this whole idea of a process to develop a strategy, is a frustrating challenge for marketers. In fact, it was number 3 on the list. But only 1/4 of marketers actually plan to make it an objective for the coming year. And if you were to rank order all of the objectives, you would see that it actually falls to number 7. And we're going to come back to this idea later in the webinar and show you how the lack of a process or a strategy really hampers results. Brand awareness is one more thing I want to point out on this chart. Although only 1/3 of marketers claimed that this was a challenge, we see that over half actually want to use search marketing to improve the awareness of their companies. And we know that search offers a great way to do that, so it's good to see companies making that a priority. When your company comes up in search results, like page 1, the top of page 1, that really sends a message about your credibility. And if you come up more than once because you have a lot of listings due to social media integration, and you take control and command that page, so to speak, that type of authority builds your trust and improves your reputation. So we really liked seeing that. Another question that we asked had to do with lead sources, and we asked them which sources of leads have become more important to you over the last 12 months. And here you can see that inbound marketing lead sources are not just growing in importance, but are actually dominating as an important lead source when compared to more traditional outbound methods like trade shows or direct mail or print marketing. So let's start with the big one here on this list, which is SEO. SEO tends to be a very cost-effective, very efficient option for generating highly qualified leads, and 94% of marketers would agree with that, citing SEO as the most important lead source. Social media is right on its heels with 85%. Blogs were not rated perhaps quite as highly on their own as a lead source, but we know that blogs are a great content generator and play a big part in SEO success. Okay, so moving on, we saw how SEO is growing in importance as a lead source, and here is a look at the contribution to overall lead volumes. And on average, organic search is responsible for 25% of leads. Now this is a big thing because when you invest your time and money and effort, and of course it has to be the right effort, which is what we're going to cover today, into generating leads from natural search traffic, there is the potential for a steady return on that investment. Because every time you take over a new spot in the SERPs, you stake claim to a certain volume of traffic. So the more traffic, the greater probability of leads. Now, granted, it definitely can take time to reach those top positions, but getting and staying there can bring about extended flows of traffic, leads, and revenue for the long term. So with those kind of returns in mind, let's look at projected budgets and what programs are actually getting funded. And here we see that 57% of marketers plan to increase their SEO budgets. But they're not stopping there. They're also putting money into social media, 60%, and 41% are also investing more into content marketing. Now the combination of these three, search, social, and content, make for this powerful trifecta, I guess you could call it, when it comes to inbound marketing. So these findings have been telling us that clearly marketers turn to SEO as a dependable and a valuable lead source. But as much as they depend on SEO, SEO also depends on them. Now that might sound a little bit funny and a little bit odd, so indulge me for just a moment as I explain what I mean. And I think SEO can really be viewed as a balancing act between two forces. So here on the one side, we've got marketers that depend on SEO. And that's what that research was just showing us. They look at it for traffic, leads, rankings, listings. But those things don't just magically happen, and that's why I say that SEO needs marketers, because marketers are the ones to provide the insights into the customer needs and their pain points and their wants, and not just at one stage, but at all stages along the funnel. They use those findings in keyword research and content development, content that's relevant, content that's optimized, and they also are the ones to decide which SEO tactics to use and emphasize in their SEO efforts. So speaking of those tactics, marketers have a lot of choices at their disposal, and here's just a good old Wordle kind of illustrating that. We know that search engine optimization encompasses a large set of tactics. You've got keyword research and content development, link building, URL structures, and so on and so forth. And not only are there a lot of choices, but there are a lot of opinions and information out there in the blogosphere on the efficacy of each of these tactics. So too many choices, not to mention information overload, can create confusion, it can impede action, and ultimately hurt your results. So that's a really big problem. So what is a marketer to do about that? I mean, how do you decide which SEO tactics hold the most promise for you? How do you decide where you're going to invest your money, your time, and your energy? Of course, there's always rock, paper, and scissors, but we actually want to propose a better way. And that's this simple equation. You start with data, you add in a process, and out come your SEO tactics. Now, that sounds simple in a way, doesn't it? I mean, it may even be too simple. But you understand, I guess, with this equation that simple does not mean easy. In fact, simple often represents this elegant complexity. It lends clarity and focus, and those particularly are the traits that we want to keep in mind today as we work through the elements of this equation. So let's start with the data first. Now the reason that we want to start with data instead of going straight to the process is that there are some benefits in doing it in this order when you're choosing your SEO tactics. And one of the first benefits is that data, particularly research data, which is what we're looking at today in this webinar, harnesses the wisdom of crowds. Our research data here at MarketingSherpa is based on the SEO experiences and results and outcomes of more than 1,500 marketers. So that is a lot of people. And what they collectively have to say carries a lot more weight than the opinion of one person, whether that's a blogger, even an influential blogger, or someone at your company. And that leads us to the second benefit, which is that data challenges our biases and it challenges our preferences, because those can get in the way when we're making decisions. Now, I'm not discounting experiences, because obviously those do play a part, but data forces you to examine and to determine whether something's a fluke or a pattern. And so in that respect, it really heightens and magnifies the importance and role of quantitative analysis. And finally, data is central to everything. It highlights your past successes. It helps you deal with your present challenges, and it directs your attention to future opportunities. So let's get into some research data so you can see how it can help you make these SEO decisions. So this chart, we see the most popular SEO tactics. So these are the ones that organizations are using the most, and they're ranked in order of their usage. Starting at the top, you see that 93% of organizations use keyword research in their SEO efforts. Those keywords then feed into other top used tactics like title tags, meta descriptions, internal linking, URL structure even. Now interestingly, the keyword research doesn't necessarily extend to the tactic of digital asset optimization. Only 41% of organizations are optimizing their digital assets with keywords. So optimizing their images, their videos, their PDFs, and their webinars, things like that. Content creation and external link building, those sort of fall into the middle. They get a lot of attention in SEO articles, but they sort of are right around 59–60% in terms of their usage. So one question that sort of comes out of this chart is, what happens if you chose your SEO tactics based on what everyone else was doing? What would that get you? Well, this next chart starts to answer that question, because here we see how those tactics are rated not just in terms of their usage, which is represented by the sphere size, but also their levels of difficulty and effectiveness. So let's look at the dimension of difficulty first. And you can see here that the top 5 most popular tactics, which were from that previous slide, the chart on the previous slide, and they're represented here by the pink spheres, are in fact the least difficult to execute in terms of time, effort, and expense. So that seems like good news. But if you look along the y-axis, which measures the effectiveness, you start to see a different story. And that is that those tactics are not necessarily the most effective, at least not all of them. Content creation towers over all the other tactics in terms of its effectiveness. But as we saw in the previous chart, only 60% of companies are doing any type of active content creation, which means that 4 out of every 10 are not doing any type of content creation whatsoever. So when you add in these dimensions of difficulty and effectiveness, you see how it really starts to change things up. And it also raises some important questions, and that is, do you go for ease or do you go for effectiveness? Now let's say you want to opt for effectiveness because you've been looking at this research data and you're jazzed because now you know which tactics are the most productive, the most fruitful, and say you've got resources. Say you've got time and money at your disposal that you can put on these tactics, so difficulty does not have to be a roadblock for you. But perhaps that's not the case for you. Maybe you're in a smaller organization and resources are tight. So when you look at the data on this chart, plotting difficulty against effectiveness, what options are open to you? Do you take the easier path, so you're at least doing something and making some impact? In other words, maybe you want to bust through these tactics that are over on the right, so those are the ones that take less time, money, and energy, so you can do more of them? Or do you want to put everything you have into 1 or 2 of the most effective? Now, we could go on and on with different questions and different scenarios, but the bottom line is this, and that is trade-offs are a way of life, and so this is why you need a process to help you make those tactical decisions. So let's look at the benefits of a process. Number 1, it protects you from jumping straight into action without developing a plan of attack, that whole idea of developing your strategy. Number 2, it arms you with a competitive advantage. And what we mean by this is that when your counterparts, and most of your counterparts, as you'll see later on, do not follow any type of methodical or systematic process for their SEO campaigns, having one and following one can give you a leading edge in terms of traffic conversion rates and lead quality. And finally, a process helps you use data as a context for making and prioritizing decisions. So how many organizations actually have a methodical process in place for SEO? Well, the short answer is not many. This idea of applying and using a consistent and methodical process for planning, executing, and measuring SEO programs is not present in most organizations, as you can see. In fact, less than 1/3 of all organizations meet this criteria. The rest either have no process or no guidelines, essentially shooting from the hip, or maybe they have some informal guidelines in place. So they're playing fast and easy, you could say, with their SEO campaigns. Now, I really like this chart because I think it's really helpful to get some examples of what these phases mean and actually hear the words that organizations use to describe the process that they have. So as you read through these sample answers, you can hear the difference, and that difference really is the specifics or the lack thereof. The trial phase marketers freely admit that they're still trying to figure it out. Transition phase marketers, they're a bit more organized and a bit more responsive. I mean, they're doing some testing, as this one marketer said. But the strategic phase marketers, they gave such detailed answers outlining each step that they follow. And these quotes here are just representative of many that we collected in our search marketing benchmark report. Very cleanly, they fell into these categories. Now, remember that slide when we were talking about the benefits of having a process, and one of those benefits was that it could give you a competitive advantage. Well, the data in this slide and the next slide really supports that idea. The tactics in this chart are the 5 most effective tactics, and these are plotted 3 times for the strategic organizations, transition, and trial phase organizations. So here we see that the strategic organizations, which are represented by the light pink circles, fare better in all dimensions featured in this chart. So usage, difficulty, and effectiveness. They use these tactics to a greater extent. They are able to execute these tactics with less difficulty. And of course, that type of efficiency is a critical factor for success with SEO. And finally, a greater percentage of them find these tactics more helpful and more effective when it comes to achieving their marketing objectives. So I'll just point out one example to illustrate this contrast in performance, and that would be SEO landing pages. Only 27% of strategic organizations found SEO landing pages difficult to implement, compared to 92% of trial organizations. So huge gap there. In terms of effectiveness, 65% of strategic organizations found SEO landing pages to be very effective, compared to just 13% of trial organizations. So again, just underscoring that idea of a process just helps you do more with your tactics. So now in this chart, we can see how the strategic organizations do on their traffic conversion rates and lead quality. And again, having a process makes a difference. Strategic companies, or those with a formal process and guidelines for their SEO programs, they convert 1.5 times more organic search traffic into leads on average than those without any process. And it doesn't stop there, because those leads are also 9 times more likely to be of the highest quality than the leads that trial organizations generate. And that's specifically how we phrased the questions we asked about the leads and the quality of those, and if they were of the highest quality. So it's clear that a systematic approach to SEO really does ensure results. And to illustrate this even more, I now want to hand it over to Jen, and she's going to take us through a case study of a company that was very methodical in how they planned and executed their SEO tactics.
Hey, thanks, Casey. Great stuff so far. And it is, I totally agree, it is so important for organizations to now have an SEO process in place. Otherwise, you're just flying by night getting your keywords, and you're not really organized. And we have a great case study that I'm really happy to be here to be sharing with you guys today, because it's about a company that executed a process like Casey was talking about. But this isn't just a one-off miracle story of SEO that we've seen. This is an example of tried and true best SEO practices that we at MarketingSherpa have seen work successfully time and time again. So let's get ahead and we'll share it with you. We're talking today about Makana Solutions. Now, if you haven't heard of them, you're probably a lot like their target audience. That was one of their major challenges that they had in this campaign. They needed to generate demand through an inbound strategy. Makana, what they do is they're a software solution that helps small to mid-sized organizations organize and execute their sales comp planning. So, doing your sales compensation can be a great challenge to keep it organized and get it done consistently, and Makana really helps organizations do all of that. So it's really a great solution. But their problem was their audience didn't really know that there was software out there that could help them do this, of course. So up until the time of this case study, all of their strategies were really focused on outbound, and they were really focusing on, establishing their brand, generating awareness, reputation, all of these things. But they found that their outbound tactics, as many organizations are finding, are very expensive, and they just didn't have the budget for it at the time. They needed to generate good leads now. So they wanted to start testing an inbound strategy, really focusing on SEO. And in this campaign, they executed 5 critical steps to really get some great results. Like as we learned from Casey, the top 2 objectives were, I believe, increasing website traffic and lead generation. And these were 2 great objectives that, in fact, Makana was able to have success in by implementing this 5-step process. So let's get ahead and take a look at step 1. So first off, they needed to create content. They didn't have a whole lot of content on their site. And if you don't have good content that your audience wants to read, you're not going to get indexed, end of story. So they knew that they had to generate some great content. But what to generate content about? What was their audience needing to learn about? What were they searching for? So they were able to identify, although their audience did not know that their software solution in particular existed, they knew that their audience were searching online about their pain points and the problems that their software solution solved. So looking at sample sales compensation plans, how to do my sales compensation, terms like that. So they created all of this content around supporting that need of their audience, providing them the samples, providing them practical best practices and advice in their industry. So they started creating all of this great content that the search engines, of course, love to see. So they needed to supplement that with data. They needed to make sure that they were actually getting ranked for the specific key terms that their audience was searching for once they had all of this great content, and they wanted to optimize it. So they used a combination of broad and long-tail key terms to really get a mix of volume and quality for traffic coming to their site. So by doing the broad terms, they were looking at terms like sales compensation planning, terms that had a lot of competition but a really high search volume. So they really focused on their homepage on broad terms like that. But when it got to the longer tail terms and the more specific targeted key terms, they created subpages within their site to really target those terms specifically. For example, instead of sales compensation planning, their longer tail key term would have been sample sales compensation plan, where they would have a landing page specifically for that plan that they developed, and you could download it from there. So they identified a list overall of 600 key terms, and they were optimizing their homepage and subpages based on the level of targeting. So they did all of their on-site optimization with their key terms, so they needed to do some off-site as well, which was their link building. They really wanted to boost some inbound links to improve their search rankings, because a good link from a good reputable site is like a really great endorsement seen by the search engine. So they knew that they had to get more links. And one thing that Makana was able to do, being a software developer, they had the advantage of having those skills in-house. So they had a homegrown solution that it would identify the links that their competitor sites were getting. So they could analyze those links and see which ones had the high page rank, which links were good, and which links could they actually feasibly get. And from that point on, they would actually reach out to those sites like online directories, information sites, and actually just doing it very granular, one-to-one relationship. And they were able to get some good links in that manner. Now, if you are not a software developer, you do not have engineers and developers in-house that can create this homegrown solution for you, talk to your web developer. They may have some ideas for you on how you can create some sort of analysis of your competitors' links in-house, like Makana did. Okay, so moving on to their next step, step 4. They really needed to follow up on their web leads. This is kind of a no-brainer at this point. I mean, no matter what lead generation strategy you're doing, you need to make sure that marketing is involved in the follow-up of leads. Don't forget about your prospects that you've worked so hard to get once they convert on your site. You can't just hand them off to sales. By involving marketing in the post-conversion process, looking at lead evaluation, lead scoring, lead nurturing, this is going to get great results out of all of your lead generation tactics, not just search engine optimization by itself. So, doing sales enablement, making sure that you're providing your sales team with the information that they need to follow up on the leads and have quality conversations with them and really move them through the funnel. So Makana really focused on this. This was really important to them. They made sure that they had automated lead nurturing going on. They made sure that they were doing sales enablement, getting that information over to the sales team. And their final step was continual monitoring. This wasn't just a set it and forget it campaign that they ran once and it just sort of ran itself on auto drive after that. They really continually monitored and updated it. And we talked to Alan, who was the marketing director over at Makana, and one thing that he mentioned was that this wasn't something that they worked on daily or even most weeks. Once they got things up and running, they really had to monitor it at a less frequent basis because they had a small team in-house. They had limited resources. But just having that consistency, whether it's once a week or once every other week, adding new content, reevaluating your campaign and having that process for optimization in place really helped propel their results and moves them forward. Just monitoring their key terms, adding new popular key terms, their inbound links, and looking at how this is all working together and how they can improve it on a regular basis. And repeating is the key, is what Alan told us. So those are their 5 key tactics. Let's take a look at some of the results they received. They got first page ranking for a lot of their targeted key terms, which was great because that led to an increase in website traffic at a rate of 200%, an increase in lead generation at a rate of 200%, lead conversion went up by 100%. And an interesting fact about this case study, at the beginning of their SEO plan, they did have some paid search, some PPC going on. They were able to drop their PPC and spend less money there and have a lower investment there because they were getting so much traffic coming from this successful SEO campaign. So while paid search traffic dropped because their budgets dropped, their spend dropped there, their overall traffic was a gain of 200%. So great case study, again, of practices that we at MarketingSherpa have seen to be proven to be effective and successful time and time again, and a process that you can use hopefully to reap some great SEO benefits in-house at your organizations. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Casey so that she can talk about SEO tactics.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I like that case study because it does a good job of showcasing how beneficial it is when you do have a clear plan for how to proceed with SEO. So let's wrap up this first section by looking at a few more examples of using data in your decision-making process. So earlier we reviewed some chart data showing how content creation is the most effective tactic in marketers' eyes. Now, knowing that, of course, is helpful, but that actually wouldn't be enough if you think about it, because you still wouldn't have any idea which content products are actually the most effective and the most difficult to develop. So you'd need more data, like the data in this chart, to guide you in where to put your time, money, and attention. So let me just look at a couple in this chart. Look at images. They're easy to create, but overall, compared to many of the others, they're not considered that effective by marketers. Web pages, well, we know that those are the most popular form of content used by organizations. It makes sense because website content is always on, it's always there, and when optimized, these can be very effective as indicated. And some web pages also serve as SEO landing pages, which is essentially the first point of entry from search. Content from social media is the second most widely used form of content. And as organizations participate across social media platforms, they leave all these little content footprints behind. But you'll notice that social media, even though it has a high level of usage, in and of itself, it does not score that high in terms of effectiveness. And you could also go even more granular. And you could use this research data to see what type of content might work best for you depending on your channel, your SEO phase of maturity, your size, or even your industry. So each of the bar charts on this slide shows the percentage of organizations of that type that deem this particular content product very effective in helping them achieve their marketing objectives. So let's start with webinars. we saw that those were fairly effective from the previous chart, and you think, okay, this might be something I want to try. Well, if you're a B2B organization, 52% of your peers would agree that, yes, these are very effective. But if you're in the blended B2B, B2C space, only 20% of those types of organizations consider those to be very effective. Microsites, very effective for large companies, not as much for medium-sized companies. E-newsletters, email campaigns, something that, everybody seems to be involved with. Well, here are what marketers in each of these industries say about sending out e-newsletters. If you're in media or publishing, more than twice as effective, or more than twice as many marketers consider those to be effective than if you're in, say, the education or healthcare space. So just going even more granular can even reveal some more options to you. So I'm going to get ready to turn this over to Slingshot, but before I do, I want to leave you with some guiding principles. And those are that when you're choosing your SEO tactics, distinguish between what is merely a good use and what is the best use of your money, time, and energy. To help you draw those insights and reach those conclusions, remember to tap into the power of data and commit yourself to a process. So I'm now going to turn this over to Jesse, and he's going to walk you through this practical methodology that will underscore those points even more.
Thanks, Casey. I think as we go through how Slingshot approaches SEO tactics, you're going to start seeing a lot of parallels between the information that MarketingSherpa has presented here and all of the information historically in their benchmark reports. We tend to look at the tactical side of SEO the same way, whether we're implementing tactics on behalf of our clients or we're advising our clients where the best use of their resources are. So with my time here, I set out to answer the question. How do marketers determine which SEO tactics will serve them the best? And here at Slingshot, our answer is do the best possible thing for your audience that a search engine can understand. What we mean by that is Google certainly is an algorithm, and there are certain signals that they pick up to determine the quality of your site or your landing page. However, it is an algorithm that is trying to determine the best pages to serve up to its human visitors. So in essence, when you're chasing the algorithm, you're chasing an algorithm that's chasing what humans like. So we tend to advise our clients, and when we're implementing tactics on behalf of our clients, we're always doing what is going to serve the visitor best, because in the end, those are the kinds of pages that Google wants to rank. Our methodology here at Slingshot has a nifty little acronym named CLASS. If you go back through this presentation when it's available later, you'll start to see some of those tactics that are being implemented currently by marketers across the country, things like title tags or content creation, for us fit into one of 5 categories when we're working on SEO campaigns. Those 5 categories for us are content, links, link profiles, and link graph optimization, the architecture, how your website is actually speaking to a search engine, social signals, which are pretty exciting, we'll dive into here in a little bit, and then the strategy, as both Jen and Casey pointed out, that you have to have in place before you can start implementing those SEO tactics. So here's a brief overview on the types of content that your company may be producing right now. We're talking about things like articles or public relations or social media content. On-page content is certainly really, really important to search engines right now. These are all nice little categories and ways that your company may be already producing content. What we really encourage our clients to do is to spend their resources taking things that may exist offline and trying to make sure that they exist in a digital format so that search engines can read them. Oftentimes you'll see that you'll have this is especially true in larger organizations, you'll have a kind of a siloed structure which allows a public relations department to kind of operate separate from maybe inbound marketing. Well, if you guys can take those efforts that are already being produced on behalf of your company, all the content that your company produces, and get that online, that's in the end going to serve you very well. This is another phenomenon that we kind of see across the web. The paragraph on the left is unfortunately one of the most common on the internet, or so it seems. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily tell a search engine verbatim exactly what you do. The paragraph on the right is a lot more descriptive. So when you're trying to determine, I have X amount of budget to spend on content creation, it's really important to be putting that towards things that are explicitly telling a user and a search engine exactly what you do in very plain terms, and maybe scale back on the marketing speak that doesn't exactly speak to your core competency. The next letter in our acronym is L. It stands for link profile or link graph optimization. In SEO, links are still very important. Both Google and Bing use them to try to figure out which sites are more popular than others on the internet. And there are lots of different ways to evaluate the quality of a link. We can look at things like anchor text. We can look at things like how many of them are coming from social media profiles or national media coverage, how many are sponsorships, how many are partners. There are 1.5 million different ways to evaluate a link. At Slingshot, we tend to look at it a little bit more simply, however. In SEO, links are like references on a resume. Unlike votes for a website, vote from site A to site B is a vote by site A for site B. They're a little more qualitative than that. So, for example, if you're getting a link from a really, really well-respected professor in your niche or a great industry association, those are things that Google and Bing can evaluate and say, yes, that link from that well-respected website is just like getting a reference from that really well-respected person. So whenever you're in doubt and you're trying to determine, where are my resources best spent on link building or link graph optimization as a tactic, always think about that analogy. Where can I find the best references for my company across the web? And the search engines will respond in kind. They're great at evaluating those sorts of things. The next SEO tactic that we focus on is site architecture. There are still several things that are really important to search engines, such as page load speed. Title tags is something that you saw on all of the benchmark reports and all of the MarketingSherpa data from the prior slides that are pretty easy to implement, still have a fairly large effect on search engine rankings. And other things like sitemaps and metadata, optimizing your keywords around images and videos and things like that. These are all architectural advances that you can make with your own website to help a search engine better understand what you're all about. So here's an example of something we do at Slingshot. We'll take our clients in the left column there, and we'll compare them to their top competition. Not only their top offline competitors, but certainly the websites that are ranking in the top 10 for the keyword phrases that are germane to their business. The really important thing about architecture is that a search engine can only understand things that you are serving up in a language that they can digest. So if you remember my answer to that question, do the best possible thing for your visitor that a search engine can understand. There are a lot of things that you can do for your visitors that are great. Not all of them are 100% digestible by a search engine. There are certain media types. For example, video is something that Google can't necessarily listen to and interpret just yet. So when you're trying to figure out how am I going to spend my resources on the right tactics, always be thinking about, is this something that a search engine can understand? Social signals across the web are becoming more important to search engines. Unlike links, most everybody, you and I and almost anyone else, can get online and actually start discussing in social spaces around certain niches or keyword phrases. And they mention things like brand, and there's sentiment attached to that. Whereas the link graph as a quality signal is relatively limited to a very small number of people who actually own and operate websites and understand HTML and can implement that to make a link. So in the eyes of a search engine, moving forward, the social sphere, not just necessarily in social media sites, but in greater things too, like forums and maybe comments and things like that, the sentiment attached to your brand around all of these discussions happening online will become very, very important to search engines. I'm missing oh, there we go. My apologies. The really cool thing about social, though, is that you can usually leverage what you're already doing as an organization. So, for example, if you're going to go out and find client testimonials, why not choose to get testimonials from people with really active social accounts or people who are really active in forums that are important to your industry? If you're going to maybe look for link targets within your industry, maybe look for organizations or individuals who are thought leaders on places like forums or Twitter or Facebook. Once you can start to prioritize your tactics and how you're going to spend your time and your money and your effort, incorporating an element of who's the most active on those social spaces is a really great way to leverage the efforts that you're already taking and making sure that those turn into social signals as well as whatever else you're trying to do, be it content or links or anything else. And finally, we're always very, very careful about planning our strategy before we actually implement any of these things. So for most of our clients, we put them on kind of this four-axis model, this spider graph, if you will. And we kind of look at, where are the weaknesses? Where are the deficiencies? If a site has fantastic content, but it hasn't been popularized, maybe you would see that really, really high on the C axis and maybe not so much on the L or the S axis. So really, as a search engine optimization company, we're interested tactically in taking clients that are deficient in one or more of these areas and really helping them wrap their heads and arms around a strategy that really encompasses growing their weaknesses.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jesse. So we've reached the end of our content for today, so let me just spend a minute or two just summarizing some of our key points from today. We kicked off today's webinar with some interesting findings from our latest search marketing benchmark report, and from that we saw how traffic and leads are the biggest challenges and goals for search marketers today. This suggests that they're looking for search solutions, particularly tactical solutions, to help them in these areas. We then saw how leads from SEO have been growing in importance and are viewed as the most important lead source by 94% of marketers. Now, as much as marketers depend on SEO for their traffic, for their leads, we saw how a systematic process for SEO is not present in many companies. Remember that less than 1/3 of all organizations actually have such a process in place for developing their programs and running their programs. And that's unfortunate because using data and analyzing data and following a process helps companies pick tactics and maximize the investment of their time, money, and energy. This last section of the webinar, we then covered the class methodology, which was a great example of an actual process. Not only is it an easy acronym to remember, but it helps marketers determine which SEO tactics will serve them best because it focuses on doing the best possible things for your audience that a search engine can understand. And I think that description that Jesse gave just really nailed it on the head. And you do that through content, links, architecture, social connections, and a strategy. So I will now pass this back over to our moderator, John. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. And I believe he has some closing words for us.
I do. Before I turn some of the questions that we've collected over to our experts panel today, I would like to let you guys take part in some discounts and freebies that we have for you. First up, we have the 2012 Search Marketing Benchmark Report, the SEO edition, that Casey kind of spoke on earlier in today's presentation. We're offering it to you today at a $100 discount. You can go ahead and visit that link that you see there. We also have a free excerpt if you'd like to read that beforehand. It's slingshotseo.marketingsherpa.com. Slingshot is also providing a complimentary website analysis today. And you can see their URL they have provided there as well. That's the bit.ly/slingshotme. And that is only for the first 50 registrants. Now, let's go ahead and move over to some questions that you guys have posed during today's presentation. The first one that I have is from Joanne, and she wants to know, Casey, I think you can actually answer this one. In your research, did you cover what percentage of organizations, what percentage of your organizations ran their SEO campaigns in-house versus outsourcing them?
Yes. Joanne, we actually did cover that, and that question does a great job of getting at the importance of strategy or the presence of a strategy, because overall, about 2/3 of organizations chose to operate their SEO campaigns completely in-house, so with in-house staff. And then the additional amounts were either doing it fully outsourced or sort of a hybrid arrangement. But what was interesting is that those strategic phase organizations, or those that have the formal process, have the thorough guidelines in place, they did a lot more outsourcing, and it's almost like they realized when they could take their campaigns far enough, and they realized when they needed to enlist the help of an outsource or an outside resource. Almost 50% then of these strategic phase organizations used consulting services or agency services, and compared to just 1/4 of the trial and transition phase companies. So big difference there.
Yeah, Casey, I would definitely echo that. In some of the studies that I've done specifically in B2B marketing, we've seen that the majority of organizations tend to take all of their marketing activities in-house, and I saw that a similar percentage there, not just for SEO, but for other tactics like PPC, social media. The vast majority are executing in-house.
Yep. I think, Jen, just when you're talking about some of your B2B research, I remember, one thing that came out of that was also, whether or not somebody's deciding to put everything out, outsource everything. I mean, what we saw with a lot of the companies is that if they just needed to do it for like a tactic or two, like they'd sort of hit the wall, that was a good time to just maybe set up a couple of meetings, just get some of that outside expertise, that expertise that's gained from, running hundreds of campaigns, across, many verticals or deep into a vertical. So that was, another option too for companies, rather than, a black and white either or situation, just consulting for a few meetings.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I have another one. What do you think is more important, on-page or off-page content? Jesse, you want to go ahead and answer this one for Adam?
Yeah, I'd love to. They're both very important. As far as which one is more important than the other, that's kind of a difficult question to answer because they're so dependent upon each other. For example, if you have a lot of great content that's existing off of your own website, those can be really strong indicators to search engines that you've become an authority on that subject. But if the content on your website isn't matching that, both in quality and sometimes even in quantity, then that is kind of a disconnect. That's a situation in which Google or Bing might look at that and say, well, I have a really strong signal on the off-page stuff, but it's really not matching, so it must be a false positive as a ranking signal. Same can go the other way. You can have a site just full of great content, but if you don't have the right off-page signals pointing back to that, then it's hard for the search engines to look at that and say, well, it must be really valuable because a lot of people are pointing at it or aren't.
Good point. Would you say that on-page is probably a better starting point for someone just starting out?
I would absolutely say that, yes. Today, more than ever, it's really, really difficult to achieve great search engine rankings that are stable without having really good content that serves your user on site.
Okay. Let's see. The next one is from Alicia. She says, we really need to improve our SEO, but we have a small team, and it's so time-consuming to generate content. Suggestions? What do we think, guys?
Yeah, it's such a great challenge. It's time-consuming to generate this content. It's expensive to generate this content. It can take forever to generate one piece. So this is a challenge that we hear across, all areas of marketing and not just SEO. But what we like to recommend is that, marketers try to look at their library of existing content that they've developed over the years. Many marketers have a lot of things like case studies, articles, press releases that they've developed over the years, and these materials have typically only reached a small percentage of their target audience. So it's perfectly great practice to repurpose, reformat, reuse these pieces of content assets that you already have, and you can put them to use as part of your SEO campaign. Make sure you update them, optimize them. But you just want to make sure you're following the golden rule of making sure that this content is actually, because it is old content, you want to make sure it's actually still relevant, still in demand, make sure you're doing that research up front. But take a look at your library, see what you can use that you've already developed to get you started, and then you develop it over time. I mean, it's not something that you can just set and forget. You're always going to be adding new content to your SEO campaign over time, and so, but to get you started, you of course want to look at your library.
Okay. I have one here that's actually based on some of the data that we covered earlier. It says, it's interesting to see that SEO budgets are increasing. How are organizations spending this money?
Yeah, Chad, I can take that. In terms of the research, what we learned from the research, 3 areas. They're spending money in analytics tools, agency or consulting outsourced services, and then staff salaries. So those are the 3 areas, but of course, the splits, depending on where somebody falls in terms of their maturity or their process with SEO, that's where we start to see some differences. The trial organizations, those with no process, they spend most of their SEO budgets on staff salaries. And if I recall correctly, I think it was like almost 90%, like 87 or 88%, really high number. And you can contrast that to the organizations that were in the transition and strategic phases of SEO. They spend less on the in-house staff salaries and more on outsourced services. I think they were spending 3 times as much of their budgets on agency or consulting services as compared to the trial organizations. Also, those strategic companies, they designated more of their SEO budgets for these advanced analytic solutions. Again, likely understanding how they can, in a sense, extend their budgets and get more out of them by monitoring, measuring, and analyzing the outcomes from their SEO efforts. And so, of course, those tools would help them do that. So I hope that answers the question.
I think that covers it. I've got one from Rick here as well. He says, if I have resources to target only one aspect of SEO, ooh, Rick, what would you recommend my first move be? Jesse, you want to take that one?
Yeah. I would focus on some part of your industry that may be lacking in information online. So try to fill a niche or a void with information. So for example, in the SEO industry, a really, really solid way to analyze what position 1 versus position 2, that data wasn't really there, the actual click-through rates from position 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. So one of the things that Slingshot did was we took all of our client data and we did a very comprehensive study, and we released that and said, hey, we've got a statistically significant sample set that says position 1 gets 18 and change %, and position 2 gets about 10%. So that's one great way to go out and try to tackle that. Whatever you're going to do, I think that starting with content is always the right way to go.
Content is king, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us today, guys. I would like to point out that our Marketing Sherpa email summit is coming up in February. And up until December 31st, you'll still be able to save $100 off your ticket to register for that. So we do want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to hop on the call with us. We hope you enjoyed it. And until next year, thank you again.